In this video, we'll be exploring how we can build two Notion formulas. So one is a simple one, so which is a criteria check about how we can whether the password is meeting some criteria, and a level 2 an advanced one, which will be calculating the score about the password that is entered. So now let's see how we can build this thing. So to build this thing, there are some rules that we need to see about. So we'll just see about these rules. So we have like criteria check, we have these rules and all of these things. So for now, let's take all these things and then put it in a separate page. Now let's look at how these formulas work. So first we'll start with the first formula. So in this formula we'll be seeing about the criteria. So first the criteria is characters length be 8 numeric characters and uppercase lowercase. You have all these criteria, and this is about these formulas, the space characters and repeating 3 times of these characters. And then the text about how it works. This is the first formula. The second formula is we have the overall calculation of each of the uh, requirements for the score. So now, and additionally, we'll have score details for the password score so that we can know what is the details for each of these passwords. Both of these formulas are put in the video description. You can just get it from there. So yeah, so let's see into how we can build this formula. So let's create a new property and let's call this criteria. Kind of write these things. So we're creating the formula here. Okay. Now we have the blank formula. So let's first understand what we want to create. So let's go to the details and let's take this first one and let's go here. Yeah, so this is the requirements for the first level, which is creating a criteria checker. So this kind of clears it. So the criteria to check is first it needs to have minimum 8 characters, and then one uppercase, one lowercase, and one digit, means from 0 to 9. And you'll need at least one special character. Then there's no spaces that is allowed, or more characters that should be repeated more than 3 times. And no common patterns also, like these examples, and no external contain the username, and it should be equal to the edited passwords. Let's first create let's function so that we can create variables and we can use certain sort of formulas. So just create a let's. So let's basically allows us to create variable names and assign some value to the variable names, and then the last value will be the result of that function. So first is minimum 8 characters. So we're getting variable. So this can be it needs to check, it needs to return whether it is having 8 characters or not. So it needs to return a boolean, which means nothing but true or false value. So we need to check that. So if uh, passwords property, password property, not length, which gives us the length of the property, is I need to check if this is less than 8. If it is less than 8, then we need to return true. Otherwise, we need to return false. So we can rename this variable property to we can rename this to something like has 8 characters so that we know that it is a boolean property. So we can rename that to has 8. So you know that it's a boolean property. So and the logic here is like if it is greater than or equal to 8, we need to return true. So it will be greater than or equal to 8. Okay, that is about the first variable, which is having eight characters. And after that, we need to have at least one uppercase. So has okay. What it does is if the password has an uppercase letter, which means if we kind of convert the entire password into lower, and if it is equal to the password, means it means that there is no uppercase. So let's explain it. So if the password is equal to password dot lower, then return true, else false. So this essentially means that if the password is having all lower, which means all of the letters of the password is in lowercase, then this password and the actual lowercase of the password should be equal. So if it is not equal, which means it is having some uppercase. So if it is equal, like if the password is equal to the password dot lower, then it needs to return false, which means here it should be not equal to. So it's not equal, it is having some uppercase letter, so it will be returning true. And similarly, as lower, if password is not equal to, like if it is not equal to password, this time it is password dot lower, so it will be password. And if it does not have row, if it has row, you need turn true, otherwise it will false. So these are the first three conditions, first three criteria, and we have like another criteria here, at least one digit. So let's go has digit. So how we're going to do this? So first let's define what are the digits. So we can create a let function or let's function, whatever it is. Let means it allows only to create one variable. Let's allows us to create many variables. So for this, even though it will require only one variable, we'll create a let's. So it will like let's variable, and let's define what is digits. So digits is an array from 1 to 9. So it is an array, and what we have to do here is the last in this let's function. Okay, what we have to do is for each of these digits, we have to for each of these digits, we are using the map functions that we can check for each of these digits. So if the password contains, so if it contains current, essentially returns the current value of what digit is being used. So current.format, and yeah, that is how it should be. And here, since it is always better to use comma here so that it doesn't show full error, so it'll be like, so it knows that the last is the result value. So yeah, so in this function, how do we find hash digits? So we have a digits list of digits, and for each of these digits, we'll be using dot content. So if the password has this current digit that is inside this map function, if it has that, it will return true. And if like so after this function, currently like each of these digits will be converted into a true or false value. It will be having true if it is inside the password, if it's there inside the password, or it will be false if it is not there in the password. So what we need is at least one of these digits are true. So for that we'll be using the contains function. So contains true. So which gives us a value like whether if so contains true returns a boolean value, which means it returns a true or false. So if there is at least one true in this list, it will be returning us true, which means that at least one of these digits are in the password. So that is about this one. So let's go into the next criteria. Has special. So this is for special characters. So for this one, we'll be actually using something a much more better way to do that. So it will be much more robust. So instead of writing each of the special characters in the list, we'll be using the match function. So we'll be like using if function. So we'll be taking in the password and we'll be using the match function here. So and we'll be using a special string here, which is called the rejects regular expression. So essentially, you can give some code which is valid in regular expression, which can be used to filter letters in this password. So we'll be using a special regular expression, which means that shift. So it will be A to Z or small a to Z or 0 to 9. So what it essentially means is you get the special character when you press shift along with each of these keys. So if password has any of these special characters in this list, it will return an array of that list. So if this array is not empty, so if it is empty, so if it is not empty, we need to return true, or otherwise we need to return false. So it just checks like if the password has one of these special characters, and if it has one, it will return the uh, list of those special characters. And if the list is empty, if the list is not empty, which means there is some special character in the password, we need to return true, otherwise we need to return false. So that is about this condition, this criteria here. The next criteria is no spaces. Yes, spaces. So this is a simple one. So we can use if here, if password dot contains, you see contains function here, contains space. So that is inside a string. So space is also a character, so we can use that inside contains inside the string. So dot contains a space. Then if it contains, we need to return. So we don't want it to contain space. So we'll be using contain space dot now so that it returns. So it does not have space. So if it does not have space, you need to return true. Otherwise, it return false. So that is how it is. So that is the next criteria. And okay, so now we have that one. So the next one is no repeated characters beyond 3 times. So this is kind of non-simple one. So next is has no letter repeated. Repeat. So we can name the variable some name like that, and then this is the value for the variable. So now to check this, what we have to do is we are going to define a let function inside this so that we can use variables. So we'll be using lets so that we can remember what is going to what is there. So and so first we need to understand what is the logic for this thing. What is the logic about this criteria? So we are going to check for each of the character in the password. So for each of the letter in the password, we are going to check the next 3 letters or next 2 letters to check if it is equal to the current letter. So if it is current, like if the next 2 letters are the same as the current letter, it will return a true for that letter. So that if the entire list, so each of the passwords list will be converted into a boolean, which will be converted into a true or false value. So if any of these true or false values in this list contains a true, then we need to return it has a repetition, which means we return false. So this list should not contain a true, so that we need to return true at that time, otherwise we need to return false. So I'll just show you how we can do that here. So we need to go to password property dot split so that it returns the list. So you're using empty string inside the split function, which returns the list of all the letters in the password, and we're using dot map function. And inside this map function, we're going to use a let function so that we can correctly index the current and index values. So we'll be using a let inside the map function. So we'll be creating command first so that it's much more readable. So yeah. So inside this map function, the current letter is going to be current letter is current, the current variable of the map function, and let's take I as index, and this is the main returning value of the let function. So if so, what we're going to check is we're going to use an AND function. So AND inside this AND function, we're going to check for several things. So first thing we're going to check is if the current letter is the first letter, it's fine. So but if it is the last letter or less than last 2 letters, then we would not like to check for this, because anyway it's not going to be uh, what is it, repeated character, because it's in uh, the last two characters. So we need to check that if index is less than or equal to or less than uh, the length of the password list. So we'll be using password dot split length. So this gives us the length of the passwords list. So if I is one of the last letters, and you don't want that. Yeah, uh, I should be I minus 2 actually, or I should be less than length minus 5, length minus 2. So that the last two characters are known. So we have this one. And the next thing, so if so, it only continues after this if the index is not the last 2 letters. So I is index based or 0 based number, so that the length is default -1 should be like if you give a passwords list length -1 equals the current letter. So current text is that one. So if you give -1 here, that is the last letter. And if you give -2, it is the second last letter, and if it's the -3, and it is the third last letter. So if it will proceed this thing only if it is less than the third last letter. So let's just do that. So we actually want this to be true so that it continues if it is not the second last or the last letter. So let's just continue. So after this, what we need to check is we need to check uh, that. So I'll just create another variable which is going to be password list. So that will be much more. I'll be naming it password letter list. So which is nothing but this one here. Just take that and put that, and you can just use this reference here. So it's like password letter list. And what you want to check here is you need to check that the password letter list that is equal to the password letter list, not at I plus one or I plus one. This checks that if the current letter that is at I, or we can take this as current letter itself. So it'll be like current letter is equal to is equal to password letter list at I plus one, which is the next letter. So if it is equal to that letter and the current letter is equal to the same list, but the next second letter. So just it checks like if the characters appeared two times. So if we add 3 one more time, we'll check for the next. Currently, it is checking for next two characters. So +1 and +2. So it will check for like the next character and then a character after that. So that's 2. So if you want to check for like 4 characters, you can add another 3. But for now, it's like 3 is fine. So you can just do that. So this is the end function. So now that uh, it returns true or false based on the letter array. So now we have a list of true or false values for each of these password character or password letter. Now we need to check if this password has true or not. So it should not have true, so that we know that any of the characters are not repeated. So we'll be using dot contains and contains true dot not. So that we do not want any of these passwords, sorry, any of these true or false values in the list to have a true, so that like none of the characters are repeated. So yeah, so here it seems like there is some packet that's missing. So this see what's that. So yeah, so we have Mr. Comma here. So yeah, that's about this criteria. So the next criteria is we need to check if there is any common patterns. So maybe continue with the next criteria. The next criteria is common has no common patterns. It's no common patterns. So inside this we'll be using a let function as usual to define the variables, and inside this we'll be using something called common patterns, and we'll be creating a list of that. So let's just kind of copy these things here. Just copy these here and just paste that here. The thing about formulas is automatically saves it for you, so that if you just click outside, it just saves that. So that is one good thing about that. So yeah, so let's just kind of put this inside double quotes. Do is we have to map through each of these patterns in this list, and then we have to check if that is in the password. And if that is in the password, we need to return a true. And we need to, at last after that, we need to check that if there is any true in this list. So if there is uh, if and there should not be any true in this. So if there is not a true, we need to return true, something like that. So just do that here. So I need to common patterns patterns dot map. So current, uh, so just put the name, select small tool, and map. So what we're going to do is we need to check if the password has this current pattern. So we're using password dot, actually we need to use dot lower so that it compares what is everything at lower. So this is the string. So it contains current dot lower. Just so this returns a list for each of these patterns in this list, whether it is a true or false. So if it is there in the password, it will be returning true, and we do not want any true on that. So we need to check that contains true dot one. Yeah. So that if it does not have these patterns, you need to return a true value. So that is what has no common patterns. In the next criteria for us to check is does not have the username. So it has. So to check that, we need to use two properties here. The first property is username and the password is straightforward. So like you can just simply return this. So instead of using any function for small clarity, so you can actually use a simple one like password dot content or password dot lower dot contains the username property dot lower. So this is a simple one, so much more straightforward and understandable. Uh, Instead, we can use an if function. So you can use an if function, which essentially says so if password dot, or in fact, it is the same thing. So we need to kind of password dot contains username dot low, then return true, otherwise false. It's just like a wrapper or something, so it's not as essentially required. So just the function inside the password dot lower is just enough. So just wrap it inside a function so that it's much more understandable. So for people who are just watching, so so yeah. So the last criteria that we need to check is if it is equal to the retype password. So to do that, so is we'll need to define a variable for that. So is same is retype password same. So you can understand that if the first word of the variable name is like has or is, we know that it is a boolean value. That is, it is a true or false value. So that's not better to understand when you're getting it. So for this criteria, what we are doing is we need to first make sure that the password retype password is not empty. So for that, what we'll do is we need to first check that uh, retype password is not empty. So it's not empty dot not, and we'll be using this syntax for and. So it only goes to the next part of this. So this is a shortcut or method of writing and. So we have this and function here. So instead of writing this and, if you only have two arguments, you can just give that inside. You can use the syntax here. So retype password empty. So if it is not empty, only if this is true, it goes to the next. It goes to check the next uh, condition here. So if it's not empty, and then it goes to the next one. So here we need to check another. So we need to check that uh, the retype password. So retype password lower is equal to the password property low. So with that, we have completed our criteria check for each of these things. So we have a boolean value for true or false value for each of these criteria. Now what you have to do is we need to kind of create a checklist of other checklist or list. Yeah, a checklist of other these things criteria completed, and using that we can create the UI. We can create the UI based on that. So let's do that. Let's call that variable checklist, and this is a list. And so what I do is I'll just first of another list of lists, so that it will be helpful for us to kind of format what text we want to show when we are doing this. So we'll do that. So first we'll be just creating placeholders for each of these things. So this will like each of the just typing in these criteria. So hasEightChars. So what is the text you want to show if it is not true? Something like that. We have the list now, so we have to type in what is the thing that you want to show if this is not true. So we'll be getting that. So after this checklist is done, what we'll do is so you can kind of type in the thing that you want to show. So here we can actually use another conditional here. So what we can do is we can just check if the retype password is empty. So we can use this syntax here for us to create a simple empty function function. So you can use retype password is empty, or you can show the thing that you want to show. It can be the retype password is not. So these are the criteria checklists we are having. And now what we have to do is we have to, for each of these thing in the checklist, we have to kind of create a list and then we have to format that. So what we'll do is we'll use the map function. So for each of the item in the checklist, as you can see now it is showing a checkbox like whether it is there, whether the criteria is satisfied or not. So that criteria is done. So, so for now it's showing a list of all of these. So which of the things are uh, done. So what we have formatted. So for each of these things, we'll be using the map function. Format that. So it will be giving us the one of the list. So in that list, what we have to do is we need to check if first we have to filter the checklist. So if we have filter checklist and filter for current dot at 0 is equals is not equals to. So which essentially means it returns a list of the list which the first letter is not true. So let's continue with that. So, so so here we actually have to do one thing. So here we have to kind of use does not contain the username, so that is not here, so it's much more understandable. So yeah, so let's note that. And here in this thing, we need to use something like that. We need to put that in angled square brackets so that it can actually understand that this is a group that we need to use the shift thing. So this is the syntax for our expression. So yeah, so now we can see like this list is empty, so that it's now showing no output. And the next step for us is to show some output. So currently it's showing no output because all of the criteria is kind of okay with the current password that is there. That is name at 123, so it's kind of fine. So what we'll do is we'll kind of create a let function here so that we can create a variable. So we're using let's function and we'll be using the checklist value. Uh, and, and what we have to do now is we have to kind of check if the checklist value is empty. We need to show that password is strong. Otherwise, we have to list what are the things that needs to be changed. So we'll do that now. So first, we need to check if which list is empty. We'll use the function. So if check list values dot empty. So you need to check if it is empty, and if it is empty, we need to give something like the password is strong. And if it is not empty, what it should do is for each of the values in this checklist values, checklist values. It's like checklist values dot map. So what we'll have to do is we have to return the current dot map 01, which is nothing but the string that we want to show here. So here we want to show this string that we want to show here. When if this criteria is not satisfied, we want to show this string here. So we'll be selecting that here. So at one, and now this is a list. The result is a list of these strings. What we want to do is we want to join that using we'll use a join function for that. So we want to add an enter for that. So this is uh, this is the letter for character for enter. So it automatically creates an enter space there. So now if you see, so it's showing possibly strong because it satisfies most of the criteria here. So let's say if one of the criteria is not followed, what happens is you can see like it is showing the errors here. So it is showing the values here. So it is saying minimum character is required. It should be at least one digit, and the date password should be same as the password. So all of these things are not satisfied. So what you have to do here, so now we have to format this so that it is much more readable and understandable. So what the first thing that we'll do is for the password is strong, we'll kind of format that using style. So it'll be like it's cool. Completely up to you, like as how you want to format the string that you want that you want it to be shown. You can add accordingly. So I usually like this. Usually would use bold and bold. These combinations will be much more readable and to be understandable. So that's what we're doing. Using this code and bold is much more. Using this code and bold style is much more readable and that's more better in the UI. So just use that. And optionally, you can also use emojis something. So kind of is fine. And for the checklist values, so what you have to do is we need much more customization here. Instead of just showing the values, what we can do is kind of instead of showing just the plain text, what we can do is we want it to be formatted using uh, style. So we can format that, and you can say we want code. So as you can see, it's much more readable now. So we know that which are the errors, which are the things that needs to be done, and then give some more bold. Now we can give orange. And now, as you can see, this is much more readable now. So we know that these are things that needs to be fixed. Like this can be improved a little bit. It can be better even more. So for us, for example, we need to know the number of things that needs to be fixed and the total, like how many things needs to be fixed and those things. So we'll be doing that now. So what we can do is to show the values. What we can do is first we can type something like uh, criteria need the following things are found. You can say like issues are found, and you can use the enter thing, and you can kind of do that here. So now we can do something like that, and essentially that is how it is. We can use the style thing here, or same thing for here also. You can use that here also. You can style, put it here. So now you can see that. So you have to take this enter outside so that it is the enter is also not highlighted. So I have to do take that and put it outside here. So, yeah, and don't take the space. Yeah. So now you can see it's much more clear here. So now it's showing a heading that issues are found and the issues are actually done. So what we need is now we need a number. So here we need to show the total number of issues that are found and the number that is shown here. So so we can do that here. So how can I do that? So we'll see that now. So first we need the total number of issues. So for that what we'll do is we'll kind of uh, use checklist values dot length. So I can use checklist checklist values dot length. Let's make it like dot length and plus, so as you can see, the total number of things are shown here. So it's showing number of things here. So we have to kind of format this even better. So it's not clear. Yeah. So now it's saying how many is found. Now what we want is you want to number these things in order. So what we can do that what we can do is you can go in this map function. Here we can take this inside. You can put this inside a bracket. You can do that. Yeah, we can do that. And inside the map function, we always have the index keyword. So the index keyword gives the index of the current thing that's going into it. So it's like we can use index plus current, so which gives us the index of that thing. And index is zero base, so we want actual numbers or numbers to count. So we'll be using we can use index plus one, and we can put that in a bracket so that you can know that it is numeric calculation. You can do that, and we want a space after that, or so we'll add a space. Yeah, so we want a space, and we can also have something like that. So it's not very good. Now, as you can see, there is these numbers that is shown, and this how it can be done. And we can also remove the space here, one of the space. Yeah, so now it is much more readable and it's great. Yeah, so now we can fix these things. So if you fix this thing from one, so first name 8 characters are required. So we can type 8 characters, something like that, like ABCD, and now it's saying we need at least one digit. So maybe you can, and as you can see, it is also containing common patterns because ABCD is a common pattern. So now we can just take that and use what 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it sounds strong. So it's like so we need 8 characters and should be that should be at least one digit. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3. And the retype process should also be the same. So maybe if I just click to start with, I didn't type anything, it will show that retype password is empty, and it just shows that. So if you type something in, so it'll be like I just type only name, and then it shows that retype password should be the same as the password. So you can just type the same thing here, and yeah. So now this is a strong password. So that is pretty much it. So that's how this thing can be built. This formula will be in the description, so you can just take it from there if you want, or if you like to build it yourself, you can just build it yourself. So yeah, so that's how it is. So that is about this formula. So that is how this works. And there is this password I'm having, so let's try how this password is. So let's try to see how it is. Yeah, so it should be same as everyone. And here you can also add some emojis if it is if you require. So you can be like type something like the password strong. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so that is about password. So now let's go into the level 2 of this formula, which would be creating an actual score checking, like computing the score of the password, string score of the password. So, for example, we'll just show this thing that it already exists. So now we are going into the second level of creating the thing. So let's get into it. So here, this is the preview of the formula that you're going to be building. Just as how we kind of created the current formula, like we have the let's function here. So we'll be defining one of the variables, not each other, and we'll be just creating these four variables, and at the end we'll be just adding all the scores. That is the overall thing about this. And the score details, what you're going to do is uh, so this is like the same formula. This is the same formula just as here, but just that instead of the score here, what are the values for each of the metrics you are using for calculating the score of the password. So now let's get into building this thing. So just write these formulas, uh, score and score details. So first we'll be building a score formula. So for that, let's create an empty formula property, and this is the formula. So let's just build that. And score details. I kind of take this one by one. So this is the score overview. So we're going to be checking for these things in the buzzers. So first we have to kind of so the first we have to create is the length component of the score. So let's go and build that. So we're taking the length thing here. So let's take this thing and, and that's what here. So that's for the score. And so let's start with the length thing. So let's go to the formula. And here what we'll do is just get a length function so that we can create the variables. So let's and the first thing we want to do is length score. And let's just do something for just having that. And what are the details, like what do we want to do in the length? So these are the details. So this is for length. So let's take this and put it here. Okay, so now this is criteria for what is the score, like how much score we are going to give this on the line. So if it's like 8 to 9 characters, we'll be giving 10 points, 10 to 11, 15 points, and then 12, 15, 12 to 15, 20 points, and then 16 plus, then we'll be giving 16 plus characters, and we'll be giving the max points, which is 25 points. Yeah, so let's see how we can uh, do that in the formula. So let's go to the formula. So now what you're going to do is you're going to create, so essentially what you're going to do is let's create the placeholders for each of the things. So we'll be like length score, and let's just put placeholder. Then we'll go to uh, you can go to we'll create a placeholder for all of these things and go to entropy next. So we like and overall score is nothing but we're going to be adding each of these things. So we'll be doing that. So we create a placeholder. Okay. So now let's start doing all these things from the one. So the length score, what we want to do here is so this is the criteria for that. So let's just do that as I explained earlier. So yeah, so let's just do that. For length, what we're going to be doing is we need something for 8 9 characters. It's not like that. So let's use the select function to define a variable. And so let's define a variable. So let's call that range, or let's call that how do you say points list. And what it can have is you can have a list, it's a list, and for each of these lists, it can contain sublists. You can like you can have a range like so it's like 8, 9, 10 points means from 0 to 7 it will be like 0 points. So we have to do that first. So 0, 7 is 0 points, and from 3 to 9 it is like 10 points. So this is the points list. Now what we have to do is for each of these lists we have to first identify what is the length of the password. So let's be like password. Uh, so what password length? So let's be like password length, and we can call the password uh, property and dot length. This is the length of the password. So now what we want to do, the logic here is we want to first find out in which of these ranges does the current length fall, and then we have to first find out which in which of these ranges the current password length is, and then we have to take the corresponding point of that range. So first we'll find the range in which this password length falls. This, first we can find the range in which this password length comes in. So we can create a range variable. So to that we can use the filter function. So we can be like we can use points list. So points list dot filter. So when to filter, the condition is like this length is false. This length is in between one of is in between the start range and end range. It includes both the start and the end number. So let's do that filter. So the current. Uh, so you can use something like just for more readability. We can use something use and so current dot add 0. So inside this points list, we have each of these individual list, and inside that individual list, we are having the current at 0, and it's point list dot filter. So we are getting each of these full lists, and inside that, we're getting the first element, which is the this list we're getting here. And out of that list, we need to get the first list. So we need to get the first number out of that. So we need to. So this is the first element inside the like inside this list. There is this first list. There is at 0, and out of that, we need to get the first number here. So this first number here, to get that, we're going to be using at 0 once more. That is at 0 once again. So to get that number, this is the start number, and so start number is less than or equal to the password length, and the password length is less than or equal to current at 0. At, yeah. So this gives us the second number in that list. Gives this number. So it's just saying that. So if the password length is between the start number and end number, including both of those numbers, we're using equal to sign here. So including both of these numbers, if that is inside that range, then return that list. So this end list will be just one of these lists in this. It will be one of these lists inside the main list. So it will be like so I have to take that list. So Let's take that at 0, so that will return the list, the one of these it will at. So filter will return us this list with one of these lists. So you have to take that one list out of those the main list, so we're using at, so that we get one of these lists, and that is a range. So now we need to get the score for that. So the score for that is, so what we want to return, so the score is what we want to return, so we're going to return length score. So for that, what we want to do is we want to take the range. Range is one of these lists. We want to take the second element in that, which is nothing but at 0. So we return at what. So that is everything here. And for now, we can just kind of also take this. We can kind of type it as we type the formula. We can just type that in. So for now, we can just have the length score. Let's see how the length score is. So let's see what the length score is. So it's 10. So the length of the password is, so it is 8 characters. It's like 4 characters and only have other 4, so that's totally 8 characters. So it is coming in the 10 points category. So let's just try how this works. It's like this is the length score. So if I add like, if it's less than 8, it's like 0. So it's 8, and let's type like after 10, if it is greater than 10, or if it's equal to or greater than 10, it's greater than 10, it should show 15 points. So let's type 2 more characters. So it should be like, so you can see that it's like showing 15. So because it is the total characters is like 11 characters right now, so it's like showing 15. So our function is working. So this is working properly. So let's go to the next metric. So which is entropy score. So let's go to that. And let's bring on the details of what we need to create that thing. So this is the entropy score details. So this is the like simple version of entropy. So this is like the log of the character set size. So this is what you're going to be doing. So what we have to do, let's just do that in the formula. So entropy is nothing but how much random is the characters in the password. So we have to kind of use that. And let's just do that in the formula. Just explain while you're doing. So just do that. I'll just explain what that is when you're doing. So score, entropy score. The next variable that we are defining. So that, so what is the entropy score? So let's create let's define variables. So let's use this. And let's do that. And let's put a command here so that it doesn't show the entropy score. Okay, so in this score, what we need to do is first we need to take the length of the password. So let's call for that. Let's create a password variable. Password dot length. And what we're essentially going to do is we need to check which of the characters are inside the password. So for that, what we'll do is we'll kind of use a filter kind of thing. Uh, so we'll be having a main list, so which will be kind of doing the thing. So we'll be using password at match. So it will be kind of something like this. Using a main list, and inside the main list will be having each of the thing, and we'll call or some will be calling some of that. First, what we'll be doing is we need to start with 0, and first is we'll be using kind of the match function here. So password match. So we'll be using REG or regular expression for us to find if there is A to Z in the password. So let's go with it. A to Z. We'll put that inside square brackets so it understands its regular expression. The regular expression understand that it's a regular expression. So match. So what you have to do, this returns a list of characters that are uppercase. So let's do that. So we need to wrap that inside if. So if this list is not empty, we will add 26 headers. Otherwise, you will add 0. So what does this essentially mean? So what we're trying to do here is we're going to group characters into categories. So we have the uppercase category, lowercase, and we have special characters and digits. So we have like 4 characters, 4 types of uh, categories. And entropy basically like this means like what is the probability of character being there, like a digit, and we want to for each of the like if in the entire password there is only one of the categories in this. So we only need to add, like, take this log, this character set size. So we need to create the character set size first. So to create that, that is what we're going to do here. So if we want to only include the characters in the total possible characters as of the characters which are in the set that is currently given. So let's just find the variable name as set size. It can be that. And so if it is having uppercase letters, then add 26 letters. And similarly, we need to add for lowercase letters also. So password dot match. We'll use lowercase letters here to Z. So if there is lowercase letters also, then you can add another 26 characters and add the total number. And after that, you need to check for numbers. So if there is numbers. So yeah, so we have to next we have to find for digits. So let's go and do that. So use 0 to 9. And so if there is any of these characters here, then we can add another 10 digits to the total size. So essentially what we're trying to do here is, so only if one of these category letter is there in the password, only then we're adding the total group inside this, so that it's much more better. So instead of adding all the characters and then only some of the categories are there, so it's much more representative or much more better about that. So that is how it is. And uh, let's just add some special characters. So password dot match. So as we did earlier, so we'll be using the list. So if we use the shift interesting here, and we can use all the things in this that so we'll do something like that. We'll get some number, and the total number that is possible is 15. So we'll like 15. So this is the character set size, and this will add these things if it is not there, and we have to put sum on this. So that is for the character set size. This is the total. So return dynamically it will return the total number of size based on the characters that are used in the password. So now let's calculate the entropy. So the entropy score is nothing but just as this formula here. It's length into log 2 into character size. So it will be like length. In the sense not, and we have to use the password and the password. So length multiplied by log 2. So we actually have a log 2 function. So that is inside function. That's a built-in log 2 function. So we can use that. So set size. So that is for that. And so we are actually missing a comma here. This comma. So that is fine. So password length into log 2 into character size. So this is the entropy score that need to be doing. So there is one case, so where if the total character size is 0, that is when the password is empty, it will be 0. So none of these will be true and it will be 0. So we need to handle that in this case, or we need to we need to do something that so that this does not, because log 2 of 0 is something some undefined or something like that. So we have to handle that time. So when if the password is empty, we need to just return 0 for entropy score. So let's just do that. So before that, since it's not empty, we can just see what is the entropy score here. So we can just be like entropy score, and you can see it is like 50 point some number here. So if you include like less numbers, it will be reducing. So this name is like 24, and at 1 2 3 we just add more numbers, entropy is increasing. So the amount of possible, like if you include more characters, like if you also include special characters like that, it will be increasing. So yeah, it's just something like that. So that is, so the more longer and more number of categories there is in the password, the entropy score will increase, and that makes the password more unpredictable. And for example, we can try to use the password here. So it should give us some huge entropy score, something like that. So it gives something like 119. So that's yeah. So if The more longer and more number of categories your password uses, the higher the entropy score would be. So that is one good metric to have to take about the score of the password. That is entropy score. This is entropy score for the password. So now let's kind of if the password is empty, it should give something like undefined, should not give any result. So currently, like we have a password, like if the password is empty, it should give some undefined results. It should give something not good. It should give something like that. So instead we want 0. So what we have to do is we have to kind of uh, make a situation where we have to, like, if the password is empty, we have to don't have to calculate any of these things, and, or you can just that here. You can just use a simple function like password uh, empty and use this syntax here. So if it is empty, then just return 0. Otherwise, you calculate the log of the thing. So this is the simple syntax. So if the password is empty, return 0. Otherwise, you can calculate the entropy of the score. So you can return. So it's this thing. And even if the password is empty, now it returns 0 instead of defined together. So as you can see, now it's returning 0 for the entropy score. So that is about the entropy score. So now let's get into next metric. Okay, so that's about entropy score. And the next metric for us is character diversity. This is the next metric for us. So let's take that. Just do it. Like once you understand the logic of these things, it becomes just an easy thing. So just you have to understand logic and how it works, and it becomes easier. And so let's get into the next type of metric. So which is character diversity. So we will call that diversity score. So diversity. So So what do you want to do here? So what we are essentially checking is we are kind of checking like each of these criteria here, just as how we earlier did the criteria formula here. So we are checking that here. So that is the diversity. So what you're going to do here is we're going to check for 4 things. The first is uppercase, lowercase, and if there is digits, and if there is characters. So if all of these characters are like at least 3 of these categories are used, we'll be doing a 5+1. So it's kind of a simple one. So let's do that. So let's get to that function. So inside this like diversity score, we have like 3 individual separate scores. So we'll be creating a let's function for each one of those and then explaining each one of those separately. So each one of those we'll be doing that each one of those separately. So yeah, so let's just do that. So let's define let's variable. So sorry, we'll create variables. And the first one is has uppercase. So this might be familiar like if you're already done the previous formula. If you've seen that how we have built the earlier formula, it will be much more helpful for you. So you'll be much more familiar with the thing that I'm going to know. So it's like has uppercase, so that variables. So it's more simple. So we're not going to be using the if function as how we did earlier in the previous panel because it's kind of it's not understandable. So I'll just do this. We'll just try to do it. So password is not equal to password dot lower. So this essentially means that if password is not equal to the password at lowercase, which means it has one of the uppercase, that lowercase is not equal to the password itself. So this is like uh, the uppercase formula. So likewise, we have as lowercase, just be like now we have these 4 things. And what we can do here is we can just collect values, just like that, and you can just be like as uppercase, as lowercase, and as special. So we can take dot filter, is a filter function, is the function. If current is true, it's current, or we can directly, or we can say that it's true. So you can use it like that. It's equal to, so this gives the list of how much of these categories are true. And yeah, so what you have to do here is you have to first uh, kind of take a list of values. So we have to take values list dot length to 5, so that we add 5 for each of the score and add that add so if like what to call if values list of length is greater than 5, greater than 3, greater than or equal to 3, then you give 5 more points, was 0 points. And then we start a command so let's see. Then let's see, so that is what the diversity scores. Let's see the diversity score for forward diversity score. So it is 25 points since it's kind of having all the categories. So if we take one of the categories, it shows somewhere around 15. We'll take the numbers, it's like 20. And since you're having like name here, so it's your uppercase, lowercase, and you have a special character, so it's showing as 20. And since you're having at least 3 of them, so there is uppercase, lowercase, and special, it's showing 20. Let's take one of them, it should show somewhere around 10. Okay. Lowercase letters, a special character somewhere, it's kind of start. So, okay. So that is about that. So just kind of saw about it. So this expression here, we have to put this shift inside the bracket so it works properly. Yeah, so now it should work properly. So if we go here, type one of this, so we have to get. So we are actually editing the retype password. So what if we do? So we need to go and edit this one. Like that, we get 10 because there's only 2 types of categories. So if we get three categories, and there is 5 bonus, we're getting 20 something like that. And we add 1 to 3, we get 25 max score. So we also have to edit that here. So the little expression that we used here, we need to put this shift inside. So that's 24. Just erase that and just solve it. So yeah, so that's one thing that needs to be changed. So and here we also have to change it in one more place. We have to put this thing inside. So inside the square brackets. So yes, that is about diversity score. And so next thing that you have to do here is let's go on. So there we have to see about randomness. So let's build the formula here. So we don't actually have details about the randomness here. So we'll just create that. That's how we have to do it. So I'll just explain that how we can do that while doing the formula. So let's just that. Okay. The next thing that you have to do is randomness score. Let's just do random score. So let's create so let's use let's function so that we can declare so that we can create variables or declare variables. Okay. So let's start a function. So the logic for this is as how we are classifying like categories here. So we have different categories. Like we have uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and then we have numbers, digits, and then we have special characters. So now randomness, what it means is for each of the letter in the password, we'll be checking what category it is, and the more number of changes in categories will be increasing the randomness score. So you can just do that now. I'll just explain how we're doing that when we are doing the formula. So let's do that. So let's call password chars as password property dot let. So this gives us a list of characters in the password, and we actually want this is out of so we would like to have something like that. And now what we want is for each of the uh, letter in the password, we need to categorize it into one of the categories, which is uppercase, lowercase, number, or special character. So we can use the denomination, like for example, if it is an uppercase, we can call it we can substitute that, replace that with u or something like that. So let's just do that. So for each of the characters in the password, so each of the characters in the password, we have to find its category and then replace it with that so that we can check for its randomness. So charts dot so here we're going to use the match function. So current dot match. So here we need to check if it is uppercase. So we'll be using the regular expression thing here. Z. Now this returns us a list. So we need to check if this list is true. What I'm going to do here is we need to check if this is true. So if this list is not empty, we need to uh, put that with A, or it's uppercase, we can call something like U, and let's just do something like that. So you can use ifs, instead of using an if statement, you can use if so that you can create multiple if statements within the same function. So I'll just create something like that. And the next thing is we need to check if it is a lowercase letter, so we can use the same regular expression. Actually, before we do that, we need to put a comma here. Okay. So now let's check if it is a lowercase. So, so if it is lowercase, we can substitute that letter with L. So this is checking like one letter. So the current is just one letter. So in this one letter, if it is an uppercase, which returns the list of uh, if this current letter is an uppercase, it returns a list with that letter. So if it's not an uppercase, it does not return anything. So we are checking that if this is empty, we can use U. So you don't have to write empty. Like we can also write something like empty but not. So if it is not empty, then you can replace that with U. Otherwise, continue with the if function. So instead of writing this like that, we can just simply write this one. So this just means the same thing. So if this match function is not empty, which means it is a true value, you can substitute that letter with U. Otherwise, just continue with the next if statement or next if condition. So we just go to the next one. So next is we need to check if it is number. So let's go current match. And so it checks if it's a number. So if it's a number, we like to kind of say it as digit. So it's D. And if it does not fall under any of the categories above, we can call it a special character. So let's put yes over here. So we're not having any condition here because if has a the last value in it, like we have pairs of conditions to check, and if it does not match under any of these conditions, it has a fallback value that is the last value in that is without any condition. So in we are giving the fallback value as s, that means it is special character. Now we have the list of characters. Now each of the characters in the password is like substituted with what category it is. So for example, this password will have something like U and then L. It will have three L's for each of the small letters and then S for the that, and 1 2 3 will have D for that. So it will be like something like that. So now we have the list of so what this exactly does is I can also kind of show it's here. You can just show that an example. So if it is kind of if the password is name at 1 2 3, then it gets converted into something like a list of so it will be U L L and then it will be S, S and then so this name will be converted into something a list something like this. After it goes through this function, that is this map function, it becomes something like this one. So it just replaces it with this list. And now here in this list, we need to check how many times it is changing. So for example, it is changing from U to L in this thing. In the second, it is changing from U to L, and then afterwards changing from L to S, and then from S to D. So we are checking like how many times it is changing, and we will kind of call that as how many changes. And based on the number of changes, if the changes is more than 3 times, you can kind of say that it's random, and you can give a higher score for that. So that is what we're going to essentially do here. So yeah, just take that. So now let's call this list of let's call this character type list. So type list. Okay. Now what you have to do here, the next thing that you have to do here is you have to kind of for uh, each of the character in this thing, we need to check whether it is same as the next one or whether it is the same as the previous one. If yes, it needs to return true. Otherwise, not. So for that, we need to go through the chart type list. So let's go chart. list. For each of the letter in this list that we are having, it needs to check if it is the if if it is the same as the previous one. It needs to not return anything. It needs to return false. Like if it is different from the previous type of category, then it should return true, so that we can kind of filter like how many times it has been changed. So we'll use AND function here. So that so first we need to kind of check if it is the first letter. We just have to ignore that because we don't have to use that. So if and we can also use a let's function so that it's much more understandable for us. So let's use a let's function here so that we can declare variables and we can use that. So it will be like let's call uh, current type as current, and we can call I as index. And now let's start with the function. So it's like and so if I is not equal to 0. So which means if it's the first letter, you don't have to do anything about it. You can just skip that and just don't have to do anything. So that is about that. Uh, so that is what it will be doing. And afterwards, what I have to do here is we need to check if the current type index. So uh, the current index is I. So we need to check if uh, current or we need to check the previous previous category is same as the current category. So what I have to do here is we can use the list dot we can use that function to get a value of that is I minus 1. So which takes the previous, which gives us the previous type, and if it is equal to the current type. So if it is equal to, or if it is actually not equal to current type, we have to be like it's not equal to current type. So which means that if it is not the first letter, so if it's the first letter, it returns false because and this is false, so that it will return a false for this letter for this type. So I'll just give more clarity about what this charge type list is. So it essentially is in this format. So I'll just type it out. It is something like, for example, if it is just put that here, so that it's much more easier to reference. So 3, it gives us something like uh, lower 3 lowers, and then we have this there, and we have 3 lifts. So, so a password something like this one will be converted into this kind of list. So this is the chart type list. So each of the characters inside this list is converted into that type based on what type it is. So what we have to do here is we need to check if this is different from the previous one. So here the number of changes here is there is one change here, and then another change, and then another changes. So totally there are 3 changes in this password. So we have to check that. So first we are eliminating the first. Like if you are checking the first letter, you just have to ignore that. You have to return false for this thing. So that's what we're doing here. And then we are checking like if the previous letter is not equal to the current type. So if the previous letter is not equal to the current type, then if these two are not equal, you need to return true for this letter here. So for this one, it will be false because the previous one and this one is the same thing. So for this, it will be false. But and after that, for this one, since the previous letter is not the same as this one, for this it will return true. And likewise for D also it will return true because this one is not the same as the previous one. It will return true for this, and for this one it will be false, and so on. So that's how it will be. So now this returns, now we have a list of booleans, so let's just do that. So here what will happen is copy that, and here it should be this will be converted into something like a boolean list. So it will be false to false, uh, false, and we have two truths, true, true, and then last two is false. Okay. So this is how it's going to be. Uh, so this list will be converted into something like this, an array of true or false values. And then now what we have to do here is we need to count how many true are there in this list so that we can find how many changes are there. So for that, so we can call this as uh, changes count. So here, so we have to complete this by, we need to like, so now this list of this one, we need to check dot contents, or we need to filter this list by saying current is equals to true. So which means this returns a list which are only true values. So it will be returning number of true values, only the values which are true, and we can get the length of that thing. So which returns a number of true in this total list. So it will be, in this case, it will be 3. So the changes count here would be something like 3. It would be something like 3. Uh, for name, for this list will be something like 3. And yeah, so now we are having the changes count. Next, what you have to do here is we have to return the randomness. So if, so the condition here is if the randomness is greater than 3, like if the number of changes is more than 3, uh, we return a fixed score. For example, we can return 20 points. So that is what is given here. So, so if you see here, randomness, the maximum score is 20. So if it is, if the number of changes is more than 3, that is if it is minimum 4 changes, or if it is minimum 3 changes, like we can give a full 20 score. So what you have to do here is you have to use uh, if the changes count is greater than or equal to 3, then it gives 20 points, otherwise 0. So now this gives us the randomness count, so this returns 20 or 0. So if we have done the things right, if we kind of type in the randomness score, we need to get something, we need to get 20, because number of changes here is more than equal to 3, so we need to get 20 here. Let's just check that. So randomness score, so we're getting 20. So since there are more than 3 or 3 changes here, so we're getting 20. So you can just check that. So if we take these numbers, if there's no numbers, you can see that the score is 0, because there's only 2 types here. So if we change, uh, there's only 2 changes, like uppercase is getting to lowercase and then lowercase getting to special character. There's only 2 changes. And if we just do that again, so if we change from special character to a number, it will be 20, because we are having more number of changes here. So that is about the randomness. So that is randomness score. Uh, yeah, and okay. So now let's go get into the next type that we have to do. So randomness system. Next, we have to check for policy and context checks. Context checks. So let's go. Let's do that. So see the details for that. And this is the uh, details. So that. So in this context check, what you're going to do is you need to check for 2 things. The first is it does not contain the username, or it is not in the common password list. So let's go and create. Let's create that. Let's go create that and let's do that in Canva. So okay. So let's do that. So next thing we have to do is context check. So let's do context score. Let's check for context score and let's do that. So let's create a list function uh, so that we can create variables. So the first thing we need to do here is just like the above here. So we'll just put a comment here. So if you, as we done earlier here, so we have to use something like this one. So has uppercase, has lowercase. We need to kind of create a list of yes or no values, and then we have to kind of do something like this. So here we need to first say has username. So if we need to check if there's username, and we need to check if it is there inside the common password list. So just do that. So first let's create a variable called has username. Or let's say has no username. So it's straightforward. So we need to check if password dot lower contains username dot lower. So this is a simple formula. So we're checking, like we're converting this into lowercase letters, and we're checking if it contains the username. So if yes, it return true, otherwise it return false. So and we have to actually use not here, so that getting it's not containing. So if it has username, it will return false, and if it is not there, it will return true. So that is about not. Oh, okay. So the next one that you have to check is if it is not in the common password list. Uh, not in common password list. So first we have to find what are the common passwords. So let's create let's function for that. So let's define a variable common passwords, and let's define for now. Let's define a simple one. Let's be like password. Let's be like user password. So let's say ABC. So additional ABC possible something like that. ABCD or okay, it's fine. Okay, now what you have to do here is for each of the common password in this list, we need to check if it is there inside the password. So let's use map function. Let's start. So we need to check if it is in the password. So password dot over dot contents current dot over. So finally you have to use dot not. So now this actually returns an array of true or false values for each of the password. So we need to check if there is true in this thing, and not in common password not in common password list means we need to check. We need to make sure that none of these is true. So we need to be like, so if it contains true. No. If one of these passwords are inside the password, then it returns as false. That is false for not in common password list. So it's something like that. So that is not in common password list. Now that is the context for. Now, if both of these conditions are true, so both of no username, no, it does not have the username and not in the count password. If it's not in the count password list, then we'll be, if both of these are true, then we'll be adding 5 points for each one of them. So we can have something like, uh, we can have, we can get the so list. So I'll just filter which is current is not equals, current is equals to 2. So it returns the value. Then so returns how many values are true in that. So if both are true, it will give 5 points. We need 5 points for each of these. So it will be 5 points. So return the value of, so if both of these are true, that is it does not have username and not in common password list, it will the length will be 2 and 2 into 5 will get 10 will get 10 points. So if only one of these are true, then it will get 5 points. If both of these are not true, then it will not get any points because length will be 0 and 0 into 5 will go 0. So now if we check the context score for this, it should be, since it is not having any username or it is not in the common password list, we need to get a score of 10 here. So if we write the context score, yeah, so we're getting 10 here. So that is about it. So let's try like using a common password. Let's say user at 123. Let's try user at 123. So as you can see here, it is showing only 5 because this is in common password list, and it is also having this name is actually having the username itself, so it is showing us 5. It is not in the common password list, so common password list also has user, so essentially it should be actually showing 0. I'm not sure why it is showing 5 here. Actually, it is correct. So because the username is user1 and not just user, so if I type user1 here, it's going to be showing a 0. So this is actually kind of correct. So yeah, so that is about context score, and let's get into the next one. Uh, this should be now we are pretty much completed with all of the things that are going to give us the positive score. So if we add a total for here, we'll be getting total of kind of 100. Now we need to kind of add the penalties. So for example, if it has some common passwords or we have some penalties listed, so let's just do that. So let's get the details of the thing that we're going to be doing. So let's take this details. Let's just do that. Okay, so now this is the penalties that we're going to be doing. So we have like these many categories that we need to check for. So we have first the sequential characters, that is like 1, 2, 3, and all these things. We need to check if we need to have a list of numbers, and then we need to check if it's an external or not. Then we have the keyboard patterns and repeat charts, repeat substrings, and substitutions. So let's just start with the first one, which is sequential characters. And this is like this gives us, we need to check if these things are there, and if it is there, we need to give penalty for these things. So let's just do that. So, so now it's like that is and Let's call that. So let's create let's function. You can use a command here. That's what we do. And let's first create. So here this is much like the previous one where we have different here separate boolean values for each of these user things, and then we summarize that using something like that. So let's create the first thing. It's called sequential characters. So sequential. Let's call it as sequential. So now we need to kind of check if the sequence occurs. Like we have list of characters, like we have alphabets and we have digits. Like if there is like more than three times in a sequence, then we need to give penalty. So let's define what are the uh, alphabets and numbers. So let's call a let's function. And we need to kind of do the alphabets. So alphabets, which gives us we need to type in from A to Z. So okay, now we kind of have the list of alphabets. Now let's kind of create the variable for digits, and that is from 0 to 9. So, so now we have a list of alphabets and digits. So now what we're going to do here is we need to check if any sequence of these letters is one after the other. So let's create the logic for that. So for each of the letters, so let's create a variable for that. So let's call that uh, password chars. It's nothing but password uh, empty. So this actually gives us something like so for 3 gives something like uh, we have 10. So this essentially gives like it splits it possible into these letters. So now we have a list of these letters. What we have to do here is we need to first kind of go through each of these letters. So we'll say password charge map. And first we have to let's use the let's function so that we can use variables. So let's call the current letter as current and I as index. And so let's get into the logic. So for each of these letters, what I have to do here is we need to check if the next three letters are the same as in this index. So we need to first check if this is that what type of category this is, like if it is alphabets or digits, and we have to check that if this is which category it is, and we need to check if the next one is also the in order of in these things. So for example, if it is A, then we need to check if it is next one is the next index, which is we need to first match this. We need to find the index of this one in this list. Then we need to check if the next letter is also the next index of this one. So let's just do that. So for that, first you can kind of check. You can use an AND function. AND function. So we need to check if this letter is in the alphabets or digits. So let's say if this is not in the alphabets, you don't have to do anything and it's return false. So AND function, which is alphabets contents. So we only want to proceed if it is if the alphabet is having this current letter, or we can go to the next AND. So we can also add another AND here. So you can say and add another AND, which digits dot contains current letter. So we need to check this one. And what we're going to do here is we're going to wrap that inside an OR function. Let's get OR function. Let's put that inside that. So what we're doing here is we need to first kind of filter the letters. So the letters that is here is it can be either one of it can be alphabets, digits, or special characters. So if it is a special character, we don't want to do anything about that. So we need to check if it is only thing that matters is whether it is an alphabet or digit. So if it is an alphabet, what you have to do here is so we are getting that here. So if it's an alphabet, this will continue this AND function, or if it is a digit, it will continue in this function. If it is not both of these, which means it is a special character, it will not come any of these and it will return a false because this also is false and false. So if either of these are false, then the OR returns as false. So that is how the conditions I'm currently working on. So let's do that. And yeah, so first thing is we need to convert each of these into small letters. So since we're only working with alphabets and digits, we want the uppercase to also be converted to lowercase, so we'll use lower here. So this gets this converts all first converts this name into something like name at 1 to 3, and then it converts this into an array, just something like that. So now we have a list of all small letters and alphabets, special characters, or and numbers. And next we have to find what we are going to do with uh, next we have to like check if it is an alphabet, we have to do this, or if it is a letter, we have to do this. So here what we're going to do here is the next filter we're going to add. The next thing which we're going to check is if it is in one of these last three letters, because we need to check for minimum three letters of sequence. So if A, B, and C comes together, we're not checking like if two letters, we're checking for three letters at a time. So if it's A, B, C, then we have two. So we need at least minimum three characters after the character we're checking for. So if it is one of these last two characters, like one of these characters, we need to kind of not be too bothered about that, not so you can just ignore that. So we need to return false if it is one of these last three characters, because last two characters. So because if this two we're checking for this, there is no other character. So anyway this cannot be formed. Anyway this cannot be formed part of. Anyway this cannot be part of any sequence. So let's check the next one. So which is if index. We need to check if index is so if index is greater than equal to stars positive characters dot length. So I'm missing command here. So dot length and minus 3. So we're adding 3 here is, so if it is minus 1, it is equal to I, and we need to actually add 3 here, so that if I is, so the length here is, so the length of the password is 8, and if it is, so index is 0 base, so we have maximum of 7, so index of the last one will be 7. So if the index is uh, greater than 5, that is, we don't want to check for the last two characters because it is not matter setting here. So we don't want to check the last two characters. So if index is 6 or 7, which means it is less than, like if it is 6, then it is index, like total length is 8. So if it is less than or equal to minus 2, so it should be actually minus 2 here. So the length is going to be 8. So we need to check if it is uh, less than 8. So only if it is less than 6, then we have to less than uh, if the index is less than 6, that is, if it is up to 5, you want to check, and after this, you don't want to check anything. So only if that is also true, it continues the AND function, or else it returns a false. And since this is false, it will go to the next one. And if this is also false, then it returns a false for the entire thing. So that is another thing here. So let's go to the next one. So yeah, next. So this is kind of okay. So similarly, let's add for this also. So let's add the same thing here. Okay. Uh, Now the next thing that we want to check here is now we are only having the we are only checking for up to this one. So for each of these letters, what we have to check is we need to check the next two letters. So we need to first understand if it is equal to the next two letters, and if it's equal to the next two letters, then we have to return false. So essentially, we are trying to get the index inside this list alphabets, and then we need to get the index of the current letter in this list, and then we need to check if the next letter is equal to the next letter in this list, and it is also equal if the next letter, the second letter, is also equal to the second letter in this list. So we'll just do that. So for that, first we need to kind of find the index. So first will be, let's create a variable for that. Let's call that, or you can just use that here. So alphabets, find index. So it returns the index of the letter they are currently using. So alphabets find index, which is uh, current letter. So returns the index in this list, and so you can actually use a let's function here inside this list. So you can call the index, or you can just call it current index. Current. So you can scan out the index, and what you want to check is, and so if, so let's see current index plus 1, which again etc. is equals to the password characters dot at index, or and so on. So if these two are the same letters, then let's check for the next one. So just checking. This copy and paste, just you can use this as 2. Yeah. Okay. So you can just actually use this one inside this thing so that it comes under the same end function. So just for clarity, like just for understanding what is actually happening, we use this variable, we can create this variable, and then we can just use another end function inside that. So it is about this end function. So let's so once you understand this, maybe we can put that inside the same end function here, so that it's much more understandable. So what we're trying to do here is we are checking the alphabet. So we are checking the first, we are getting the index of this current letter in this list, in the alphabets list, and we are getting the index of that, and we are getting the next letter in this list. So if it is A, it will return as B, and we are checking that with the next letter of this letter in the list. So here, if it is A, we are checking that it is M here. So to check if that is equal to this one. So if it is, like if it is an A and next is also B, so it will match with this one, so it will be returning true, and we'll check that for the two digits next after that, so it will be this one. So if these both are true, which means like after A we have B and then C, if it's true, it is a sequence, so it will return true for this AND function, and it will be true for all of these things, and this AND will be true, and since it's an OR function, it will just only check that, and if it's true, it will just return true for this character, and in this instead of this thing, it will return true for the character, and it will check that for each of the characters. Now let's just do that the same thing for the digits here, and for clarity, maybe I'll just put this thing and that thing inside this function, so that you'll be able to kind of understand that. I just wrote inside let's function for clarity, but once you understand the concept, you can just kind of do something like that. So it's much more understandable, much more simple, instead of using too many let's and functions. So, yeah, and we can kind of put this. You can put this inside the same end function, so that now it's much more. So that now it's much more simple. So yeah, so that is about this. So let's do that the same thing for digits also. Okay, and just that. So with that, I need to write digits here. So yeah, that now it detects any sequences like ABC or 1, 2, 3, something like that. It detects the sequence, and if it is there inside that, it returns a true for this. So now each of these letters is like true or false. So it checks the next three letters, and if it is in some sequence, and it returns true for that letter. Now this returns us a list of it returns us a list of true or false values. Now we need to check if there is any true in that. So we need to kind of say contains. So if there is any true value inside this list, then it will be shown as has sequential characters. And yeah, so if there is true inside that, it return true for us, and that is return true for this has sequential characters, and that is about this one. So let's go into the next condition that is required that we need to check. So let's go into that. So let's get into the next one. So the next one I have to check for is keyboard patterns. This is much more simpler. So first we need to be like post specify has keyboard patterns, and let's use let's function. So we need to create the variable super. So we have to kind of define what is keyboard patterns. Keyboard patterns is a kind of array. So it can be something like for now this is kind of okay, and you can add more keyboard patterns as required. Uh, so these are like the adjacent keys in the QWERTY layout. So that is how this is. And now what you have to do here is we need to check for if the password contains any of these patterns. So it's just simple. So if password dot password low, let's convert it lower before doing a comparison. So contains actually we need to wrap that inside a map function. So let's use keyboard stuff. Then we have to use that inside the map function. Correct. Now this returns a true or false for each of these values. So we need to check if any of these are true. So contains it's true. So if it contains true, then it will return a true for has keyboard patterns. Otherwise it will return false. So okay, so that's about keyboard patterns. Now let's go to the next, which is has uh, repeated source. Now what you have to do here is, so logic for this is we need to check if any of these characters are repeated more than 3 times in a sequence. So this is kind of the same formula which we used for criteria checking. So if there is any repeat characters more than 3 times, so let's do that. So let's define this function. So let's create password chars, which is something about password. Actually, it's something like that. And for each of these password chars, use a function inside that, and let's create variables. So letter current like this index. Okay. So now what I have to do here is you can use an AND function here. So this AND function, we have to first check if we are checking for the next like if there is 3 characters in a row. So 3 characters in sense, first we need to check the index is less than 2 or something. So it's you need to only continue if the index is if it is not the last 3 characters. So our last 2 characters. If it is the last 2 characters, just don't return false. You like uh, is. So if index is less than, we need to only continue with this AND function if the index is less than the length. And it's because we're checking for the last 2 characters. If we're checking for the next 2 characters, if they are same as the current character. So and what we check is current letter is checking the next 2 letters. So let's that one, which gives us the next letter, and it's equals to current letter. So now this checks if the next letter and the letter after that is equal. This is actually I. So we need to check if this two false. Okay, so we need to check if the next letter and the letter after that is equal the current letter. We need to true for that letter, and we need to check if this has any. So if this contains true, so this now contains true. So if this has like if any of these characters this list, so this is kind of much like this one. So I'm just gonna be like so, so it will return a list of these kind of things, and it will return true or false for each of these values. Like if the next two letters are same as this letter, it will return a true for this letter. So we need to check if any of these values are true like that, and if it contains true, we need to return true. So that is what is here. So if there is any true values inside this list of true or false values, or inside list of true or false values, then yeah, so if that is true inside this list of true or false values, then it will return true, otherwise it will return false. So yes, that is about that. So let's go to the next one, which is repeated substrings. So let's just once repeated substrings. Repeated substrings. Now here what I have to check is if there is any sequence of three letters that is coming one after the other, we need to detect that. So how are we going to do that? It's kind of much similar to repetition, but we need to check not single characters at a time. We need to check for groups of letters at a time, or we need to check for what do you say substrings at a time. So the length of substring we'll be checking is either three letters or four letters. So let's do that. So we're going to use something like class dot. So we're going to use the substring function here. So substring essentially gives us a substring from like the start index and the end index. So excluding the end index, so it's like optional. So starts from the end index and the next one. We need to check if these two substrings are equal. So the substring starts from I, and then it goes. We're checking for three letters. So it will be like I to be I plus two. But since it excludes the last one, we're also adding three. As we're adding one more, so it will be three. So it checks for it takes the first three characters and it checks for the next three characters. So goes so substring. Now we're going to check for I plus 4. We're going to check for I plus 3, I plus 3, 2, I plus another 3, so 6. So we are checking from, so if it is, so uh, let's say if the password is, so it takes the first three letters, this is I plus 1, I plus 2 takes that, and it takes I plus 3, so 1, 2, 3, I plus 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. Okay, so that is kind of okay. So we check for the next three letters. And if it is equal, it returns a true, otherwise it returns false. So before trying to do this, we need to use an AND function here. Inside this AND function, we need to first check if the index is if I is. Then first we need to check if the length is more than 6 or at least 6. So if I is less than, six, so we have at least like it will be minus 1, so we have at least. So it will be at least 5 letters out there. So we're checking for this one. And if the length is less than 5, we need to kind of know that. So the maximum is, so it will be max 0. So that we ensure that the max it does not go below 0. So it's like if it is the length is less than 5, so say if the length is only 3, then in case it comes to this function, it will be like 3 minus 5 is minus 2. We don't want minus values here, so we cap that to 0. So minus 2 will become 0. Let us check if it is less than 0, so it will be false. So yeah, that's about the current function. So so this will return a list of true or false for each of these characters in the list, and we need to check if any of these is true. Yes. We also want to check for 4. So this I need to check for only 3. I need to check for 4 also. So I need to check. I need to use an OR function. It's either 3 or 4. Okay. So let's just something like that. So instead of 5, it will be 7 because we are adding 2 more. Right? So it will be like plus 4 here, and here it will be 8. It will be 3, 4, 9. So here I can also add another variable here. We call that. So it will be also, sorry, you can just use oops, that we can. It's much more efficient and it's much more better. Instead of calling the function every time, we can just instead of using the property every time, we can use variables. That's much more efficient and faster. For instance, it's much more better. Yes. Okay, so that returns whether it's true or false for each of the letters of this password, each of these characters of this password, and yeah, that just checks that. And if there is a true in any of these characters, then we need to, and then it is true for hasIgit substring, otherwise it is false. Okay, so now if it contains true, if it is contains true, return true, otherwise that isn't true. So yeah. So let's go to the next one. So next one is has trivial substitutions. So it's pretty much straightforward. So has trivial substitutions. So let's take let's function. So you need to kind of create a common substitution. For example, if A is replaced with at and O is replaced with 0 or something like that. So we'll be creating, we need to normalize the function. So let's create the password chars, or let's create the password as well as password and normalized password. Yes. We're going to use the replace all function. So that is on, and you can use, for example, if it's at, let's replace it with here, and you can just chain these replace all functions. So you can use this dot notation to just do one after the other. So replace all. So this is the normalized passwords. Normalized in the sense the what's the substitutions are kind of replaced with the actual words, and we need to next uh, define a common password list. Password list. Okay, let's create some list of common passwords. So just use the previous one which we used. So we kind of use here user password maybe we'll just use that here. Okay, and then you have to use common password. So it checks for each of these list here, so it returns a true or false for each of these things, and if it contains a true, it return true. Otherwise, you can return not true. So that is kind of fine. Yeah. So that is about the predictability pattern of things. Now we need to summarize all of these patterns, and we need to kind of create the final summary thing. So let's create that. So let's just add all these things I've just created. So first is has sequential charts, and then this is has sequential charts. Now we have the Boolean values or true or false values for each of these things that are checking here. And if for each of these things, if any of these are true, for each of these true values, we need to add a minus 5 to the score. So add minus 5 penalty. So it will be like simple. So if any of these are true, we need to add minus 5 penalty for these things. For these issues, so if any of these are true, we need to add minus 5 for each of these two values. So we're using filter to do that. So filter current equals true. Dot length into 5. So since it is penalties, we just use 5 for now, and later on when we are summarizing it in overall score, we can kind of use minus in that thing. So for now, let's just use 5. Okay. So now this are, so we have completed with showing the penalties. So let's just see what the values for the penalties thing. So let's go button penalties, and currently we do not have any penalties here. So let's check if this kind of works. So let's just include some patterns. Uh, see, as you can see, ABC is a count pattern returns. Uh, it has like two penalties. First the sequential characters, and the second one is keyword patterns. So the second one is uh, repeated chars or something. So that is why it's showing 10, and that is minus 10. So yeah, so we have that, and let's try this one here. So it's working or not. As you can see, it's showing minus 5 because it's trivial substitution somewhere. So let's try something like keyboard patterns. So let's try it. As you can see, it is also checking for keyboard patterns. So that is great. And let's try something like repeated substrings. So let's see ABC. So it's having all of these things. It's showing minus 15. So yeah, okay. It's kind of working good. So let's go to the next one. Okay. Now we have kind of created all the necessary things that need to be created. So we have all of these things, and we also have the penalties. Now what you have to do, now we also have button clicking systems. Now what you have to do here is now we have to summarize all these things. You need to add all of these things and have to minus any penalties, and we have to get on the total. We need to get the total score. So let's do that now. Uh, so just kind of okay, so let's just do that. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's get score, and the score can be, it is a sum of all of these things. So let's see what is the score. And as you can see, it's like about 115 because we are not capped anything to the maximum things. We are not capped anything to the maximum one. So now we are having a total score of 115 for this password. Uh, so let's just cap each one of these to the maximum limits. So the max score is 25 for length and 20 for entropy. So let's go on with that. So let's use the main function to cap it. So it will be 25 for length. Okay. And we need to add some penalties here. So now the score for us is 85. Yeah. Yes. And we have two minus penalties. Uh, now we have the score ready. Now this is the score. Let's just all this score. So this is the score. Next we have to kind of format this. So formatting is totally up to you. Like you can decide how you want to show this thing, how you want to format this score that you currently have. So I'll just kind of use the previous thing there. So the score given in that formula might be a bit different. So this is what that. So it's kind of 77 here. So let's just so you can just kind of here it is kind of the same thing. The overall score is kind of the same thing compared to this thing. Um, this is the formatting that I've kind of done for the overall score. You can kind of copy this thing here. So just take this kind of these let's put that here. Start writing score. Just use that. And just call this overall score. Now, as you can see, it is showing correct format. So it's like 85. That is pretty much about the score and how you can create the score. And now let's just try how this is working for this password. So take this and it's giving 100 very strong password. So yeah, so that is about this score formula. This is kind of fine. Yeah, so it's kind of very strong formula. That's great. So let's just type some formula. Uh, so we actually want to use the round function here so that it is kind of uh, so here we want to use dot round so that it does not give any decimals or anything. Okay, so yeah, so we are using the round to digits, so it's like round the decimals to just showing in whole numbers. So you can just put that numbers. Okay, now we can just you can see the score changing. So and that is just to start to be right. Yeah, so let's just take this E at 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's just like because the length is great, it's like it's not so important. It's like need to like something like mm, that like even more stronger process. So that is about the score. Now next we want is the kind of an additional formula which is going to be the details of the score. Call it score details. And here it's kind of the pretty much the same formula. The only thing that will change is the last part of what you're doing the score. So kind of the score is kind of the same thing. So I'll just copy the entire formula here. So just like Control A, Control C, and just gonna paste that here. The change that I'm going to do here is for each of these, instead of showing the overall score, what we'll do is we'll just show the values of each one of those. So just show each one of those. So we need to first create a list of list values. That's called the variable list values. And for each of these, we need to kind of create a summary of what it is. So first is length score and what you want to say about it. Just show that. And what we're going to do here is we are going to take this list, and for each of this list, we are going to create something like so list values. Or what we're going to do here is we're going to show something like current dot at that one plus current dot at n dot at 0, and we are going to now this gives me a list of strings. So I'm going to go join that using enter, and now if you can see, you can see that it just shows the end of this code, and we need to kind of have these values. So, okay, so you can just kind of use round here, round function for interview. So enter this code, you can just call this sum, and you can just call it. So it is a round number here. So that is what it sounds like. This is the thing, and we need to kind of use the max stuff and everything. So let's go. And use a minus sign, so it shows the max. Yeah, so this is overall score. If you add this, it will come to 85. So let's just see. So 10, 20, 30, 55, then 75, 85. So it's 85. So it's currently something. So we're kind of getting new score. We are kind of getting some score and okay. So now let's just kind of format this. So it's just plain text. So let's add some formatting to this. So it can be like uh, not style have yeah. So we have this thing, but we kind of it loses context. So it needs some more context. So if the you need to show the total score and how much score it is, so it's much more understandable. So we can say the total score is 25. The last one I don't have anything because it's not score, it's penalty. So we need to kind of into that also. So first we have to be like uh, set needs to be showing current at 0 plus evaluation plus action plus current at so current at 1 and it should be current at 2. Okay, so that is loaded and yeah, and current at size is something like that. So we need to fix that. So for now we can see that we got lines for 10.25 and 20.43. Errors is full marks and NMS is full and context score is also okay. And yeah, so let's just do that. So next thing we have to do here is we need to kind of if the index is not equal to, so we can use this function this and it can be like index. So every map function has an index already. So we can use index is less than the last one, so it will be like 3, 4, 5, 6. Index is less than 5. Since it's zero based index, so we can have like so 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So only one to 4, so it's less than 5. Otherwise, we can just return the now we have something like that. And we want to also show if the score is like full like 20 like the full score that is possible, then we want to show that in green. So we can just do that. So how do we do that? So for that we can use inside the style function. We can kind of use we can use a conditional like uh, if or we can use the syntax like or if is much more understandable, so you can use if. So if current course. So now you can see it is having green for all of those things is having full score. And you can also send that for it to show a green background also. So it has something like that. And you can have green background for things that are green. And this one already style if it is not the full score. So but if request is so we just put that empty string. So now you can see that for full score it's showing green and for scores it's like half it's like showing 10 or something like that. And now for patterns and predictability, we just don't want this. We want each of these subpoints to just show what is the score for each of these things, if there are any specific values something like that. So for that, we can. So what we're going to do that? Do here is we're going to add the list of this, what is it? Each of the possibilities for penalties. So we're going to add each one of those to this list so that we can add it to the final result. And we're going to use index here. So to do this, what I have to do here is currently the penalties, pattern penalties is only returning the number. So instead of that, what you have to do here is you need to go here and inside in uh, this thing here, Instead of returning only this, we need to return each of these individually and the button. So what you have to do here is you take that and first it returns the number, then it returns a list of all of these things. It returns a list of all of these things, and yeah, so and now we can use that here. So it can be like dot at 0 returns us the number, and we can also add another yes, it will be like which gives us the value of uh, this one here, sequential characters. So let's go and type that here. So what do you want to show about that? And as you can see, it is showing sequential characters false. We want to also format that so it's much more like subdivisions of memory. So what you have to do here is, so it will be like if index is equals to 5, then you do this. Otherwise, what you can do is that kind of so now as you can see, it's showing subdivisions, and yeah, that's all that. And instead of showing false, we wanted to show yes or no. So for that, we can be like you can use the syntax here, question mark, and if it is true, it will show yes. Otherwise, it will show no. So it shows yes or no. So we have to put that in brackets. That conditions or otherwise takes full things. So put this in bracket. So now it's showing yes or no. And we'll just complete this entire list here. So we'll just do this first. Just kind of and that is about the answer. Now we can see yes or no for each of these things. So it is kind of no for each one of these things. And if it is a yes, we want to show it like in orange color. So we can do that here. So we can use inside that. If yes, that is about the same. That is the details. That's how you can get these details in here. So that is about length score and all this kind of work. So yeah, so that's how you create this formula. So we have a sort of good formula. So it's just fill up nothing. So just so yeah, so much more readable and much more better. So yeah, so let's just try this out. So let's just see how this thing is working. So I'll just try this bigger formula that I have here. So yeah, let's just put that here. And as you can see, it's showing a very strong password. Showing 100 score for the password. Okay, that's about that. And let's just type random passwords. Let's just see how it's working. So the and as you can see, details also showing the details. It's like you can see what other things are showing. So the length score is like 0 because only 4 characters, and it's saying that it's not kind of in the same password. So let's just try some other passwords. So let's say uh, some password. It's kind of okay, but the criteria is not. There are some criteria that needs to be done. So some criteria that needs to be done. So you can just fix that. So that 1, 2, 3. So now it's kind of very strong, and yeah, there is some change the password, so it's only moderate. So let's just change that something like name 1, 2, 3. So yes, that's how you can create a password strength checker in Notion using Notion formulas. So I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.